Cause up inside your head, you got a voice that says you won't get past this one, you won't win your freedom. It's like a constant war, and you wanna settle that scar, but you're bruised and beaten, and you feel defeated. This goes out to the heaviest heart.
That's right, folks. It's not over yet, not by a long shot. And in fact, our assemblies are just getting started. And if you've hit your limit, don't worry, because our panel of guests today is working diligently to bring Maine out of the darkness and back into the light. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the American States Assembly's podcast. I am Tammy on New Jersey. I'm one of your hostesses, and I serve the New Jersey Assembly as our outreach coordinator. I corrected my political status back in January of 2022, and I am a proud American. Our other hostess today is Lashell Ford on California. Lashell serves the California Assembly as their state coordinator, but what Lashell is really well known for is her Common Law 101 classes. And I'm going to go ahead and put that up on our screen now. So if you want to connect with Lashell and watch some of her common law classes, you can check her out at this link that we just have up scrolling across the screen now. So before we introduce our panel of guests today, I would like to briefly describe to you all the fraud that is taking place in America. And this swamp is definitely very deep and very wide, and can be a bit shocking for those of you who may be hearing this information for the first time. So hold on to your seats, and we're going for a bumpy ride. So let's talk about the jurisdictions. We have 3 jurisdictions in this country and in the world. It's land, air, and water, and that acronym spells law, ironically. And after the American Revolutionary War, the Americans won the land jurisdiction, and the Brits were granted the sea jurisdiction, or the water jurisdiction, and the Pope or Papal municipality was granted the air jurisdiction, or the ecclesiastical jurisdiction. That, folks, is actually our 3 federal branches of government, okay? And they were granted 10 square miles in Washington, D.C. to conduct their business. And the word federal actually means contract. And so they were contracted to give us services, to provide us services, enumerated services like we know of in the constitutions. And so the land jurisdiction comprises of things like living, breathing men and women, common law, the Declaration of Independence, constitutional guarantees, the Bill of Rights, private businesses and trade, and a federal republic. The British territorial and municipal jurisdiction comprises of things like corporations, legal fictions, dead entities, a legal system with statutes and codes, attorneys, commerce, and a democracy. And things were functioning quite well, not perfectly, but pretty good up until about the Civil War. And that's when all the semantic deceit and chicanery started taking place. And we had our first corporate president, who was chartered by a foreign corporation, and that was Abraham Lincoln. And ever since then, our American government has been superseded by a foreign corporation masquerading as our lawful American Federal Republic, which it is not. And ever since then, they've been using semantic deceit and chicanery to further enslave and confuse Americans. And this is why we see chaos that's going on today, and why people are so confused and they don't understand why our freedoms are getting taken away little by little. So the purpose of our podcast is to educate and inform people, because we certainly were not taught this in schools. And we've got a lot to catch up on and to bring everybody up to speed. So we have declared peace. The American lawful American government has declared peace, and our assemblies are back functioning in all 50 states. And so that's pretty much a brief description of the fraud that's taken place and the history. I would love to introduce to you to a wonderful book that can help you. This is Anna's book. It's called You Know Something Is Wrong When, an American Affidavit of Probable Cause. And you can buy this, you can purchase this on Amazon, or you can go to the TASA website, which I'll have up in a little bit, and you could purchase it off there as well. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you all to our amazing panel of guests today. First, we have Vanessa Avant-garde. Could you wave for us, Vanessa? She serves the Maine Assembly as the state coordinator. Vanessa's professional background began with starting businesses and then taking them public. She lived and worked on the African continent, Australia, England, and Canada. She immigrated to America in 1991 and was naturalized in 2002. This was the first time she had the ability to locate any type of true research material regarding questionable occurrences within banking, contracts given to countries, economic calendar failures, non-farm payroll oddities, explanations of CFR, and other three-letter agencies were clearly defined. Vanessa initially obtained books like Eustace Mullen's The Federal Reserve, John Coleman's works including Committee of 300, and more. That was the beginning of endless research. In 2021, she was introduced to the Maine Assembly and interviewed the then coordinator soon after she corrected her status in August of 2021. Welcome, Vanessa, to our show today. Thank you for coming on. Next, we have Lashell Moon. Lashell, can you wait for us? She serves the Maine Assembly as the lead vetting committee and orientation committee and helps with outreach. In her spare time, Lashell is a holistic healer, teacher, and interfaith spiritual leader who has always thought outside the box. She has been seeking truth ever since her teenage years, and she knows the truth when she hears it. She began her wake-up call in the early 90s, but then had only snippets of our corrupt government. She knew the banking system was corrupt and something big was planned to further enslave people, but wasn't confirmed until much later during COVID. This is when she began to learn even more from those who were speaking out. In July of 2021, a young woman traveled 3 hours to one of her spiritual meetings to tell them about the Maine Assembly and returning to one's rightful birth jurisdiction. She instantly knew that she was speaking the truth and soon joined the Maine Assembly. Lashell's whole being told her that she needed to do the simple paperwork process to correct her political status, where she then returned back home on the land and soil jurisdiction, August of 2021. It was a deeply moving spiritual experience when she read aloud her Declaration of the Naturalization Act of July 1779 document while standing with her bare feet firmly planted upon Mother Earth. She knew she was back home. That's a beautiful way to begin your journey on the land and soil. And anyway, thank you for coming on today, Lashell. Next, we have Kenneth Ray. And Kenneth is currently the treasurer of the Maine Assembly. He first became a fiduciary in the fall of 2021 until June of 2022, when he stepped up to serve as the treasurer. He has been a part of the Maine Assembly since its inception of 2020. He is fully vetted and background checked, which one of his references have known him for 48 years. He also serves as the Sign in America coordinator. Kenneth has never been a bookworm, but has common sense. He has many mechanical talents and has been an auto mechanic, welder, landscaper, oil and propane technician, heavy equipment operator, some electrical and plumbing abilities, and is basically a jack of all trades. In 2004, when he was nearly 50, after buying his first personal computer, he started running down rabbit holes. All his research opened his eyes to a ton of false flags, medical, political, spiritual, and historical corruption. He eventually stumbled upon Anna's website in 2010. And in 2016, he filed his own paperwork and also filled a UCC tying the straw man to all debts. He eventually came back to Anna's information and process. Turned out he had mutual acquaintances who were also correcting their status, and then eventually they all joined the Maine Assembly, which began in a home in Stockton Springs, Maine. Their goals are to reconstruct the lawful government who are owed to Maine and to protect its living people on the land and soil from predators. And thank you so much. We definitely need to protect ourselves from predators because there's many out there. Okay, and last but not least, we have Tanya Marston. She serves as the outreach coordinator. Hi, Tanya. And is on the vetting committee. She comes from a work history in corrections and law enforcement. She joined the Army in 1978. Thank you for your service. And although she trained as military police, she was stationed at Stockade Unit in Germany as a corrections officer. After leaving the Army, she continued working in corrections at the various county, state, or federal levels in Kansas, Maine, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, and Texas for the next 20 years or so. 10 years ago, she left Orangeburg County in South Carolina as a deputy sheriff and returned to her home state of Maine, finally realizing that the justice system is not about justice at all. After working for several nonprofits and becoming a certified housing counselor for HUD, which is the Department of Housing and Urban Development, she left the working scene altogether in April of 2022. She refused to be used as just another funding box checker to justify funds for these big organizations when the monies never reached the people it was intended for. She trusted Source would take care of her, and she was led to the Maine Assembly, where she corrected her status in August of last year. Welcome to the podcast, Tanya. Thanks for coming on. All right, so I guess we're just going to get right into these questions because I know we've got a few really good ones. And so my first question, and this could be for anybody, what was the most compelling evidence you came across that convinced you to correct your political status? Go ahead, Ken.
Well,
Who wants to go first? You guys can both share your stories. Lashell, you want to go first?
Sure. Seems like we were jumping in at the same time. It really struck home when I began to understand the history and what the word law meant, and the whole history from what happened back at the Civil War time all the way through. And I was just astounded at how much convolution had happened because of those who took over our government were using the same language and just having the capitalization be different. So people didn't know that what they were talking about wasn't really the truth. And so when I saw that and heard that, it just was, I just knew. I knew that it was all wrong and that I needed to stand up to do something about it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Ken, you want to share yours?
I was going to tell you all that I actually represented myself once in court because a lawyer never showed up and I won the case. And it never hit me until way later. What really woke me up is when I went to fight workman's comp and how nothing was there for me at all. It was all crooked and doctors and everything. That woke me up. And like you read in my bio, when I got my first computer and started going down the rabbit holes, as Lashell said, everything was so convoluted, and learning what law meant, land, air, water, etc. That was my wake-up call. Yep.
Yeah, that's great. I kind of felt the same way when I realized what law actually stood for, and it's like, wow, that makes sense now, and then just the little things that we were never taught, like the fact that the word "the," when it's capitalized, means that it's, whatever "the" is, right, is unique and the only one that exists, right? So that was pretty interesting to learn as well. But all these little the semantic deceit with using our language against us is unbelievable. So I agree. Anybody else want to share? Go ahead, Tanya.
There we go. Yes, mine wasn't really anything one thing. It was just working in corrections, for that long period. Is always, I was one of these people that always liked to follow the rules, and I always did everything right, but it never worked. And it's like the people that did things against the rules, it always worked for them, and they always got ahead. And I was always confronting the authorities on things that they said they wanted to do to make things better, but then they would go, oh yes, and then they would never do it. So it was a slow process for me, and reading, and then it's like, this is not right, and everything. And it was never about being fair. What I realized, it was about the money. And for all of the people that I interacted with that were inmates and stuff, they all had stories, and it always seemed to be, when you start listening to people's stories, that it was never anything that they did. It was always that they got convicted of things that didn't even make any sense, but other people would get off. So mine was slow. And then when I heard about the Maine Assembly, I just knew that that is where I needed to be, because of all the wrongs. This is definitely where I needed to be, so that we could right all the wrongs. I yield.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I agree with that. I was like you, Tanya. I was a rule follower. I never got in trouble with the law. Although I have a very interesting story. I don't know if I shared this on a previous podcast, but I'm going to share it today because it's relevant. But when I was in my early 20s, I was working at a gym, and I was going to college at the same time. And it was Veterans Day, ironically. And typically in the public schools, right, like kids get Veterans Day off. And so I just assumed that that the colleges had it off too. So I went about my day as if there was no school. And I was working at a gym, and I was there for the day, parked my car in the parking lot. And when I came back out, it was missing. And I thought that I was like losing my mind, because I'm like, but I'm 20 something years old. I'm pretty sure my mind is all together here. But anyway, my car was stolen. Of course, I filled out a police report and filed it, right? They never found my car. And then about 6 months later, they found my car. I got a call from the Newark Police Department saying, I found your car, right? And it had like 20 plus tickets on the windshield because the car was parked in an illegal parking spot on the road, right? So my question to the police officer over the phone is like, well, hold on a second. Why does it have 20 tickets? Because if a cop put my license plate number in the system, shouldn't it have appeared that this car was stolen? So they should have immediately contacted me from that point forward. Why was there numerous tickets just going on my car? And 6 months later, now I'm being notified? Well, now knowing what I know about what they do with all these tickets and how they're making money and how they create bonds and they're making all sorts of money by all these tickets, it made then, like years later, now that I know what's going on, it made sense then. But back then I was questioning, like, wait, this doesn't make sense, So that was, kind of like an epiphany for me too. But back then I didn't think anything nefarious was going on. I just thought somebody really screwed up here. But anyway, do we want to go on to the next question?
Yeah, sure. I have a question that came to my mind as Tanya was talking. So I'm hoping it's okay with you, Tammy, if I just ask this question. So Tanya, because you were so, for lack of a better term, you were such a rule follower and you did everything right and you were involved in law enforcement and corrections and everything. I'm wondering, was there any kind of like a mourning period that you went through when you came to the realization that there's all this fraud and lies going on? I'm just so curious. Maybe not, but it came to my mind to ask you that.
Well, when I first began doing things, I was really proud to be, in law enforcement and, and work for the federal government. And I can remember asking, it's like one of the lieutenants in one of our trainings said, I want you, when we were down, he was talking, he says, I want every one of you to take my place, and so it was like, it was in corrections. And I want you to strive to replace me, as a lieutenant, and we're just little corrections officers. And so I thought, wow, they really want us to do good. And the thing is I ran into that constantly. And I have a thick head, I guess, because I actually believed that they wanted to make things better. And so when I finally realized, and a lot of times I would be in a position and then I would always have trouble with the superiors because I was doing it. They want you to be a good worker bee. They don't want you to do anything better. They just want you to be a good worker bee. They don't want you to compete with them. So, and what I found out, and I guess I did, Michelle, thanks for answering that, because it was really sad to realize that it's not, they don't want that. They want to give you an 8-hour job and they make it so that you work your 8 hours. It doesn't matter whether you do a good job or a bad job. Just don't do it really, don't go either way. Just be mediocre. And it was sad. And I did. And I kind of and that was why maybe I left law enforcement, realizing I couldn't make a difference in this. I was just participating in the law enforcement. And then when I came back to Maine and I started working in the nonprofits, I really realized, and that was a year ago, last April, when I really found out that all the training that I had and the work that I was doing, they just wanted me to be a funding box checker. The monies didn't go back down to the people that want. And that was when I finally said, I'm not playing this game anymore. I'm quitting. and I did, and I won't go back to those corporations. It's just heartbreaking. And yeah, I did go through kind of like, it was really sad to find out that everything you thought was real is not real. And then when I got into the Maine Assembly and finding out, I mean, I was a good student, you know, going through government school. And when I found out that everything that we had been taught was a lie, and that there's a whole world beyond what they were telling us that it was, I thought I went to heaven. I went, oh my gosh, this is awesome, you know, because it was like really, really enlightening to know that there are people out there that care and that are proud to be Americans and want to help people. And that I think most people are like that. We've just been so discouraged and brainwashed into believing all the garbage that has been given us. So I'm really excited about being part of this whole movement. And I really appreciate everybody that is also a part of it too. And all the people that are going to be coming in is really great. So I yield.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that story, because, you know, it's particularly for law enforcement. So I really feel like many of us love our law enforcement because we know that they're there to protect us in the event of a serious problem going on. But then there's this whole behind the scenes thing going on with the money making and all of the lies. So thank you for sharing about that. Okay, so yeah,
I'm sorry.
Sure, Tanya. That's okay. Go ahead.
I was just going to add, you know, with in the law enforcement, not at any time in any of my training were we ever told that there was jurisdictions. I mean, we did, you know, like a county and you know, stay in your jurisdiction or whatever. The city can't go to the county or whatever. But never in any of the training that I had ever been did I even know that there was that our government was false. None of the training was, you know. So when you talk about law enforcement coming in and you know, the police or them stopping vehicles and stuff, most of them don't have a clue. I know I never had a clue. And what happens is you get the training that is usually encouraged is you're much better than these people that you're stopping. You know more, you know the law, you know. And so it's kind of sad that, and I had common sense. I'm like Ken, I have common sense. And that's what kind of like moved me through a lot of stuff. It's because it's like, this doesn't make any sense. And why are we doing it this way? And they didn't care. It didn't matter. They're going to do what they wanted to do. But most, I would say most law enforcement, at least back then in corrections, and people didn't even know that there was a corrupt government other than like the politicians and stuff. But you don't realize that it goes all the way down to the roots. And so that is an awareness that I keep in mind. You know, like people just don't know. They're like me. I didn't know anything. And so having a little compassion when they do it. So
yeah, and I would add too that think about law enforcement is only doing what they were taught, right? Just like all of us knew what our government was by what we were taught in school, right? Like we didn't question our teachers like, hey, are you sure this is right? You know, we just figured that we were trusting them to teach us whatever was in those history books, right? So, you know, in the police officer's defense, I get it. The one thing that I will touch upon is that, like, you know, for you, Tanya, you know, you probably didn't get an opportunity to come across an American State National while you were in law enforcement, have you?
No, I didn't. I mean, there was some like people that there was only maybe a few people in all of the time that I heard that they were like nationals or whatever, but I thought it was something different. you know, that it was something different. It wasn't about our true American government. It was about, you know, like the monies that are owed to us that got stolen, but it just went in and out. So I never really, and that was never really a part of at least for my experience.
Yeah,
and I
think that what I would like to see is, and this is the problem that I see all across our country, not just with law enforcement, but even with each other, right? With our neighbors, our friends, our family members, is that when somebody presents a different narrative, because we've been so brainwashed and conditioned to shut our ears, close our ears, shut our eyes, and not hear the different narrative, you know, we just dismiss it. And so, you know, that's what I think is going on with these police officers, is that they, like, I think to myself, you know, well, I'm like this little lady, you know, I'm 5'2", 120 pounds, and I've got 3 kids in my car. You know, how am I going to be any kind of a threat to this police officer if he thinks that I'm crazy? You know, which clearly, if he spoke to me, he could see that I'm, you know, I have my wits about me. But he should have listened to what I was saying and used his common sense and his compassion, right? To say, well, I'm not understanding what you're saying here. I'm going to give you a ticket for not having, you know, your driver's license or your registration, and I'm sending you on your way, right? But instead, he chose to kick me out of my car with my kids, my dogs, and steal my private property. You know, so that to me is really a huge problem, because maybe perhaps our law enforcement now, their training is taking it a step further, going further into communism, right? And Marxism, where they're getting ready to just, you know, they don't hear anybody. They're just like robots, you know, doing what they're told and not looking at people like they're human beings, right? Because they do believe that we're, you know, the powers to be believe that we're just a bunch of chattel, right? We're just animals to them. So, you know, and that's not the case. We're men and women that have lives, and we're good people. And so instead of just dismissing us and thinking that we're breaking some kind of a law, you know, they should be listening and listen with compassion, because the position that they hold is they're there to keep the peace and uphold the law, you know, and serve the public, not, you know, put them, you know, take their and steal their car. So, you know, that's all I want to say on that.
Yeah. And you bring up a good point, Tammy, because most people, you know, average people, myself included, for the longest time, I believed that law enforcement was there to, you know, stop bank robbers, rapists, child molesters, you know, like hardened criminals.
Yeah.
But at some point, having an awakening to the fact that law enforcement is sort of the street thug arm of the law, and they're engaged in prison for profit. Not just prison for profit, but like property stealing, you know, licensure, permitting. All of these things are all designed in a way that keep us enslaved in these incremental ways. And these police officers are policy enforcers, is what they are. They're not law enforcement at all, because they don't actually know the law. What they know is policy, which is what you get from a company when there's a you know, a government that looks like a government, has the name of a government, but actually has the structure and mechanism of a corporation. So they are nothing but a functional corporation masquerading as a government, and law enforcement, unfortunately, is a tool of this bigger problem, you know?
Yeah.
So such a great conversation to go down that road about law enforcement. And thanks for that segue, Tammy. I'll finally get to the next question. So I appreciate your patience, everybody. So I'm not sure who would prefer to answer this question, so I'll leave it up to you, but what is the Maine Assembly doing for outreach that you find is most effective, you know, in reaching people?
Well, let me take that up and then I'll pass it on to Tanya.
Great. Thanks, Vanessa. Go ahead.
You're welcome. So we have since I've been in and prior to that, it's really been word of mouth, because we've had someone who has reached and then has gone away and looked up their own endeavors, gone down their own rabbit holes, and a year later come back and then is on the land and soil. We don't try and enforce anything. We just give them the data and we let them make the choice, because we have noticed that, you know, the Maine Assembly actually comprises of those folk who actually have reached the conclusion by their own personal research and those that have done some rabbit hole diving and extraction of truth of that latent latitude of circumstances that they found themselves in. And those are the individuals who dare to raise questions regarding the standards of services that are being presented by the current powers that be. So those also folk who openly state that they are not interested in a nanny state and don't want to be taken care of. They also have observed that there's pollution, lack of clean water, polluted air, lowered standards of education, and so forth. And they come to the conclusion that all is not well. That's basically what they do. And it is interesting because when you arrive and someone actually walks through the door or contacts you and talks about certain things, there is definitely a fear element, because of course we've all been traumatized from birth and that traumatization and herd mentality has remained within the de facto, and that's what actually holds us to our fear of our fraudulent service providers, basically. Yes, so it is interesting. I run across a number of people who they just want to know how do you get out of that? What is the simple formula? How can you declare yourself to be a national, and what does it mean to be a national? And we wait for people to actually arrive, and quite often it's just through someone who met somebody at a function or a gathering and has been looking for a while, but they have to make their own decision. We don't push anybody. We want them to really come to their own conclusion that all is not well, basically. And Tanya has been amazing with her fortitude. She did informational meetings after our GA meetings, which was held on a Saturday, the third Saturday of each month. And she also conducts Zooms for those individuals, and we both speak to new people, basically just answering their questions and then telling them the simple paperwork and suggesting what needs to be done. And I'll leave that over to you now, Tanya. Thank you. I yield.
Okay. Could you repeat the question? I didn't quite hear it.
No problem. Yes, it's what is the Maine Assembly doing for outreach that you find is the most effective?
Yeah, and I think Vanessa, said
like,
that.
Like Vanessa was saying is.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Michelle. So Vanessa was cutting out a little bit, so I'm not really sure I would repeat what she was saying. I apologize if that. But as we have been looking to extend outreach. We have a newspaper that is really that we want to be contacting. It's called the Maine Anchor, and so we want to be working with them so that we can actually have advertisements. They're a small paper that they've just started up in the last few years. And so going to be working with them to maybe get some advertisements out. This podcast would be great. Looking to, and what we're doing now is we're Lashell and I, and also Vanessa, if she comes, if she's available, but we will go to people's homes and make ourselves very much available on an individual level, and answer all their questions and help them. So we're kind of like doing it like grassroots kind of stuff. And I'm not sure if I repeated what you said, Vanessa. I yield.
That was great. Thank you, Tanya.
Yeah, that's amazing. And did I hear, I think Vanessa mentioned that, are you going out to veterans places where you can speak to other veterans? Like no, nothing like that. That would probably be a great.
That's a good idea, though.
A good opportunity since you're a veteran, Tanya. And I know our assembly, this is just, I know I've got 2 other assemblies on here in Maine, but we're looking to do direct mailers. So that could be an inexpensive, but, hit major amounts of people. But that's what our assembly is currently working on. But that's great. I love the personalized, because that's where you can reach people that way, because they can ask questions, one-on-one. So it's more personalized. I know that's how I learned about the assembly. So I think word of mouth is a good way to spread the word. All right, so my next question is, I don't know, maybe Lashell or Ken wants to answer this. What are Maine's current goals, and how are you initiating them?
Well, thank you, Ken. So one of our current goals is to actually teach more self-governance, because many people come in and that we're all programmed so heavily, and they don't really understand self-governance. So we're putting more information about that into our informational meetings, which we have one tomorrow night on Zoom. And we are also talking about it in our orientation PowerPoints, because we like to have people really understand self-governance. They don't necessarily know that it's not a dog-eat-dog world on the land and soil. We're about peace and being non-combatant and being respectful in our communications, whether that's via text or an email or in people in a meeting.
Oh, Lashell, I think you went out.
And it's okay to disagree with someone, but it's how you choose to language. Don't know if that's me or somebody else.
I think we might have had a little bit interference.
So anyway, we are teaching people about self-governance, and yeah, and I'm not sure what people heard. But another thing that we're working on is our handbook. We want to get very clear in language about what our assembly is truly about, how we're going to go about restoring our government, how one is, supposed to do motions, and just basic information to let people know how we function. And again, this doesn't seem to be what people know coming in, or know clearly. They have mixed information about it. So we of course already had the beginnings of that kind of information to begin with, but it seems like we have to tighten it and we have to be even more specific so that people know that this is what we really expect. So those are a couple of things that we're working on. We're always, of course, wanting to educate people, helping them to understand their status on the land and soil, that it is quite different from the status that they had been trafficked into, and the need to educate yourself to, feel like you know who you are when anyone questions you, and that you really are sovereign on the soil. And that is, it's not intuitive when you first come in. It takes some getting used to the idea, and maybe learning some language to use, and then some language not to use, because they've misused so much of our language that you have to know who you're speaking with, whether they're on the same jurisdiction as you or if they're in another jurisdiction, and you have to use be careful, more careful with your language when you're talking to another jurisdiction. So education is a key component that we're always looking to upgrade with people. So thank you. I yield.
Well,
So
may I add something to that?
sure.
Absolutely.
So I remember in one of Anna's articles, I believe it was regarding civil disobedience, and I think the number was in the 2500s. And she said something like the politics of obedience. And there was a book written by Etienne de la Boutie, and that was The Discourse of Voluntary Slavery. And it gave rise to not only the French Revolution and the American War of Independence, but was also espoused by Emerson and Thoreau. And then, of course, subsequent to that, by Gandhi, who wrote his own treatise based on his own, experiences. And he, of course, led the largest peaceful civil disobedience movement in the world, which was amazing. And that doesn't mean that we become violent. It just, even in the face of the most awful repressions and injustices. And I do strongly see that there are a number of nationals, American state nationals, who do know who they are. They do know that they are self-governing. And self-governing doesn't mean that I can do what I like. It doesn't mean that at all. It means collaboration. That's what it really does truly mean. And we're not an exclusive group. But I found that very interesting when Anna wrote about that. She talked specifically about civil disobedience. And it's something like if you go blueberry picking on a stormy day, you're going to blueberry pick. On a stormy day, you might need a raincoat. And if you agree to take on the actions and you accept the responsibilities and you go with the self-governance, you're not just talking about picking blueberries or eating them. You're actually doing it. You're actually taking the action. I yield.
Thank you. Can I just add to that, because I love that. I do remember that article about civil disobedience, and her speaking about how Gandhi, led the largest peaceful, civil disobedience movement. And I would add to that I think that having self-governance is being a responsible adult, and having accountability. And that it can be as simple as, when you're driving the street and you see on the road, you don't just and say, oh, this is going to pick up, or that'll blow away, or, like maybe you pull over and you pick the garbage up, right? Like I know my husband does that. And, it's the little things, but we've been accustomed in this, fraudulent system to lie, steal, cheat, and manipulate, right? And that's not my problem. That's somebody else's problem to deal with. And so self-governing, we're all, looking out for each other, and we want a peaceful community. So we're all there for each other, looking out for each other and doing the right thing. Yeah.
Absolutely, Tammy. That is what it's all about. We're so used to doing a corporate mindset, or who can serve me? Where's the customer service department? I've heard that so many times. I'm like, all right. So Ken, can you share your vision for Maine once your state is fully functioning?
Vanessa, you want to take that one?
I think Ken is ready. He was unmuted.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ken.
Well, it's okay either way. My vision is huge. I see the resources on the wind, the solar, the water, the forest, the farming being given back to the people. I feel the people of Maine will be provided with non-fluorinated water finally, almost free electricity, no more toll roads, schools that teach actual American history and vital skills for young adults to prepare for their living as adults, cures for all health issues, including mental health and so much more, free. Almost like the utopia that I thought I was born into. Somebody else can elaborate more on that, but that's my vision. I yield.
That's a beautiful vision.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, that was very good. Well said, Ken. Because even though we're looking forward, we have to also work in the now. We have to work in the present, so we're not thinking and wishing and hoping for the future. So the now is the structure. The now is getting everybody vetted correctly, make sure that they have status, standing, and they qualify, so that they can actually, the structure is sound. And it is important when you, once you've been summoned into session, and peace has already been mandated at that point, we are actually at that time obligated to let them know that they should stand down. And I'm talking about the subcontractors, correct? So it is interesting. It also means that we're all still fully fledged and formally enrolled in the states of the Union. And there's no basis for presumption or of territorial custody over any of us or any of their lands or assets. And of course, we do that with a proper declaration and recording and publishing. That way we dissolve any pretense. And that's something we teach and talk about and educate. There's a pretense that we're under the territorial and we have to succumb and be subjected to the statutes, as you say, and the codes, as you say, Tammy and Michelle. And it is interesting. We also disapprove of any theory that they might presume that we are absent. That's very, very important. And I remember when Anna talked about coming out from under the rock, and that was in the General Assembly book that she wrote it when she and her husband had climbed out from under the rock, I believe, 1998. And then in 2015, they reissued their sovereign letters and patents. And that affords us, all the American state nationals, the opportunity to extend our national trust for another 3 generations. And that is extremely, extremely important to remember. So we have 3 generations. So I think it's quite vital that we continue to forge ahead. And having the opinion that anything that pauses or halts any assembly will not be tolerated. And we simply just keep moving ahead. And I believe that is something which is so important if people recognize that. And initially, when I speak with new individuals, I always determine whether they are, what do they want within the Maine Assembly? Or are they district-minded? Sometimes I'll have someone who say, I want to go back into the industry of the hospitals and I want to be a doctor again. So I just send them on to some other organization, which actually is so much better, and they will feel more comfortable in that kind of situation. So I think it's vital to do that initial, just asking what people want to do within the assembly. And from that point, you can actually see, well, I want to be a grandmother. I want to take care of my grandchildren out on the land. And that's fine. That's great. And then you've got others who just go, all right, I'm ready. Let's forge ahead. Can we forge, please? So I yield on that.
That's great. Yeah. I think that we do have quite a few people that are just so used to having somebody else take care of things for them, right? So it's very hard to get them in the mindset that, well, this government is of, by, and for the people, right? So that means that we're all involved and we're all working it. And so that's a bit challenging, but I do love those who, like all of you on here, kind of took the bull by the horns and just went with everything, and you're like, all right, what do I got to do? Where do I got to sign up? Let's do this, So I love when I get the opportunity to speak and talk with all of you about that. I love that. And we also do have people that do some work behind the scenes. They don't like the spotlight. They don't, and some people just don't have the time. So, I'm really hoping that people will get used to and adjusted to, taking a little bit of time, because there's a lot to do. There's a lot to get caught up on. And it's all for the greater good of everybody that lives in this country. So if they can have a greater understanding of that, I think that there'll be more participation. So we spoke about self-governing. So I'm going to move on to the next question. Could somebody explain, because some people that are watching this podcast might be hearing this information for the first time. Who can speak on our civil peacetime flag? And for those of you who haven't seen it, you can see it behind Lashell. Lashell has it displayed right to her. But that is our American civil peacetime flag. And so could we talk about the difference between our Title V wartime flag and our civil peacetime flag? And go ahead, Ken, you want to speak on that? Go for it.
I'll speak some, and then other people can add to it. So every country on earth has two flags minimum. One's a peacetime flag and one's a wartime flag. Our flag, peacetime flag, behind Lashell there, was created by Oliver Wilcott, double T, back in 1779. And Anna's PDF at annavonrights.com, put in a search for Civil Flag of Peace, and her PDF will pop up about that. We are taught at a very young age to pledge allegiance to the wartime flag, and we are never exposed to the Civil Flag of Peace, which we have never been at war since 1812. That we have been at peace since that time. And with the war flag, that's how DC de facto corporations keep reapplying a war on something, a war on drugs, a war on mosquitoes, a war on, yada, yada, so they can benefit from the war and keep benefiting, getting into our coffers for their benefit. And you could do your own research on that. It comes up on search engines. You do a little digging, and there's quite a history on it. In fact, the silver flag of peace were flown on all the customs houses when the immigrants would come into this country up until the last one was 1919 out in San Francisco on a postcard. And I yield.
Does anybody have any further information about or have proof of our civil peacetime flags on the custom houses? I know Anna talks about how it was described in the book, The Scarlet Letter. But I'm just curious, you said something about a postcard, Ken. Which postcard was that you said?
I went looking at old postcards for something like that and came across a couple 10 years ago or so. Pretty much everything's pulled off the web. Plus, there was a website where he had a picture of it, and I can't remember his name, the old man that had put together all kinds of evidence, passed away, and somebody's keeping his website going. Oh, barefootsworld.com, maybe? But that's the best I can tell you.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Anybody else want to elaborate a little more? Add to that?
Well, there's a 4197.
Tammy, I'm not sure. I sorry.
Go ahead, Tanya.
All right. How about Vanessa? You go, and then Tanya. Tanya, you want to add to that after Vanessa?
All right, thank you. So I remember 4197, the article by Anna was 1 if by land, 2 if by sea, and that was the dual system fraud. Of course, mentioning again that each country, every country on earth has both a war flag and a peace flag. And we're supposed to fly them depending on whether our country is at war or at peace. It is interesting. And the Title IV flag, and that I believe was June 18, 2023, misuse of Title IV flag. That Title IV flag was created and set apart for the use of the British territorial subcontractors when exercising our delegated powers under the provisions of the Constitution of the United States of America. So it is interesting that that's what they have grabbed and nabbed a hold of. So those industrialist interests that have not honored their obligations to the Constitution and have in fact instead commandeered not only the people and the resources to serve their own commercial self-interest, of course, which is at our cost. I yield.
Yeah. Go ahead, Tanya.
I was just going to add, and I came across this. I don't know how valid the information is, but it was talking about both the war and the peacetime flag, that the flag that has the stripes going across are because the gun barrels are up fighting, and with the peace flag, the stripes are going headed down, which means that the barrels are down to the ground. So I'm not sure. I came across that, but I wasn't sure how valid that is. But I thought that was interesting. I yield.
Thank you. Ken, go ahead. You want to add something?
I was just going to say, I mentioned Barefoot's World. That does not exist anymore, and it's under a new web page for searching up for that silver flag. I yield. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so who could speak to explaining what the criteria and benefits are for becoming an American state national?
Ken, you've been in the longest because you did your paperwork a long time ago. Can't you support
Yeah,
you.
go ahead, Ken.
Okay, so when I did my paperwork in 2016, the Maine Assembly wasn't up for a few years. The benefits are, of course, you have your full unalienable rights. You have to abide by, do no harm, etc. I approached my local sheriff and put the tags, like Lachelle's flag, on the back of my old police cruiser. And I told him I'm a test. Very powerful people are watching me, and they're going to see and test what goes on. And I'm going to be driving around without a license because it's retired. And I explained to him the whole jurisdiction on the land, and my car is not registered, and vehicle, And I traveled 3 years that way, no problems at all, including around going downstate where there's more cities and stuff. I backed away from that only because now, as treasurer, and I hold important things, like I use a registered vehicle. But you have your full inheritance coming. As Anna states, everything that was stolen from us, our land, our gold, everything since, the Civil War. I answer questions better than trying to come up with stuff, but it is extremely important. You have your total freedom. I yield.
Thank you, Ken. And what are the criteria for people to be able to, become an American state national?
Well, first you have to have the willingness. You want to be a national, and you have to be somewhat educated and know that something is definitely wrong. You have to have the right agenda within yourself to help mankind and to help others move on the road, and also educate them. It's very, very vital. It is interesting for those who come to that realization. They know that something's wrong. They already know that. And they may actually have gone down specific rabbit holes themselves. They may not have the in-depth truth of, or the bottom line, I should say. So quite often someone will come in and say, I'm not coming in for protection, but I'm coming in because I want to be back on the land and soil. Don't want to be participating at a level where I'm enslaved, or I'm chattel, or I'm a ward of the state. So these are the things that individuals determine for themselves prior to coming in. But they also want to know that what they've learned or been educated on is factual. And that is something that when I first came in, I had gone down many or several rabbit holes looking for an avenue or a modality, actually, to actually free myself as an individual. Of course, I was not born on American soil, so I was naturalized, and that's another process that you do, which enslaves you further. That once you do that, you actually have access to not only Anna's articles, but you have access to knowing certain things, because Anna puts those specific things within the articles. I came in 2021, and I had just done a huge rabbit hole down syntax parsing grammar. I cannot tell you the amount of hours that I'd spent just listening to video after video, and it was extremely interesting. And not only that, I had done that previously with other modalities, only to find that it was bought, paid for, copyrighted by the Vatican. And that was just, to me, that was just amazing, absolutely unbelievable. So it was, so people come in with those, they still have some kind of remnant of uncertainty. And I recall at that point, I had received some, I think I was in the assembly probably 6 months, and I received some letters from the IRS, and I went down that rabbit hole. And I was amazed just looking at Anna's articles, just how much strength you have as a national, not just the strength, but what you are owed and how much you should know. And we all know that taxes are voluntary. And subsequent to that, I wrote a 6-7 pager to each individual that had an address on that particular piece of paper. And they don't want their minions reading that. And they throw all sorts of things at you as for fear mongering. And of course, we already know there's no way they can lien you. The only individuals who can lien you is ATF. So I'm not conducting business in alcohol or tobacco or firearms. So, and when you lay that out and you explain that, you really truly recognize, even if you go into the paralegal system and you listen to videos where paralegals and CPAs talk about the destruction that they have actually committed on individuals, of which they are highly apologetic about, what they've done to individuals because they did not know. They also succumb to the fear mongering. So when you are, I would say, the benefits of being an American state nationalist, you really do find your fellow man. You do, because you have to collaborate to actually get to the next position or to the next level. You have to work together, and it doesn't matter you have a different mindset or a different point of view, but if you can just reconstruct with how to build an assembly or reconstruct and just do those things that are lawful, you will actually achieve something before you even know it. So those, and of course, getting onto the land and soil is a very simple process with your 1779 and your 2 witness testimony forms. And that's the first thing that I state to anyone who is thinking about it. And then I also state, then they have, it's recommended or it is suggested that they then notify the Secretary of State and so forth. So there are other additional steps. And basically I say walk, don't run. Just walk through the steps, because you have to feel comfortable when you mail a letter out to another jurisdiction or the international jurisdiction such as DC. And the first thing that I always state is we adhere to do no harm, be peaceful, and be non-combatant. I yield.
Awesome. Thank you, Vanessa.
Yeah. Lashell, did you want to add to that?
May I add?
Yeah.
Yes. So to get your witness testimony form, you want to go to our website, which you'll see momentarily at the bottom of our screen. It's themaineassembly.org. And you download the form. You download 2 of them. You have either people in your family or people that know you that are at least 21 years of age or older, who have known you for 7+ years, and have them fill out the form. And then they have to have it signed in front of a notary. So you can go to even a bank notary or, wherever you find one in your local town. Or if you're already going to be joining, and coming to a recording session with someone, you could actually have the recording secretary notarize the forms for you. You also need your birth certificate. And if you were naturalized, you would need your naturalization papers. And then once you have all of that gathered, you would email us at info@themaineassembly.org and let someone know that you want to, come back to the land and soil, and then a meeting will be scheduled to actually be with the recording secretary and get recorded and then also have it published, which is part of the process. But thank you. I yield.
Great. So our last
one more thing
question.
about that. Let me just add. I was just going to add about passport pictures. You do have to have passport size pictures to put on your witness testimonies. And if you go to Walgreens or someplace like that, you just ask to get a passport picture. You can tell them that it's not for a passport, so you can smile, and then you adhere that to your forms before you give them to whoever's going to do your forms for you. Thank you. I yield.
Yeah, thank you for adding that, because I feel like people, you know, even though the information is up on the website and they can find it, sometimes it's easier for people when they hear it, you know, what the steps are. And just to be clear, we did say that they have to be either you know, born here, or they have to be living here for at least 7 years, right? If they immigrated here, right? Yeah. So, all right, the last question is, how can, you know, I do have, just for everybody that's watching, I have the Maine Assembly's website going across the bottom of the screen. And, you know, so you can write that down, but if people want to get involved, what is the best way that they could reach out to you?
Email at info@themaineassembly.org. Info, INFO, at themaineassembly.org.
Okay, so I'm going to add that up to the bottom of the page here. Let's see. Right there, info@themaineassembly.org. That's where you can reach out to them. And, you know, if you want to get more information, if you want to speak to somebody a little bit more, and that's how you can get in touch with them. And also, because our assemblies aren't funded yet, we go by donations. So if you're watching this podcast and you get to donate to the efforts of the Maine Assembly, you can reach out to the treasurer, who is Ken on the podcast today. And his email address is treasurer@themaineassembly.org. Okay, and he can let you know if you're willing to be generous and donate some money. Things that we do in our assemblies is we're noticing, you know, the courts, we're noticing our trustees, and that takes a lot of money and time for postage. And there's a lot of different efforts that our assemblies are trying to initiate, and that takes money. So if you feel generous and would like to donate, we most certainly could use your help. So is there any last words that you guys would like to say before we end today's podcast?
I would like to extend our thanks to both you, Tammy Healy, and Michelle Ford. This was quite an experience, and we thank you for honoring the Maine Assembly. So we stand in honor here, and we would like to collaborate with you at some point, even though it might be on a normal gathering process. But thank you very, very much for all of your work, your hard work, your wonderful capabilities with the web pages and with the podcasts. So I thank you personally, and I thank you from the Maine Assembly.
Thank you. It's our pleasure.
Absolutely. I feel such a strong commitment, and I could probably speak for Tammy when I say this too, that, you know, the word just needs to get out. I think every state assembly is looking forward to growing and meeting more like-minded people who really recognize there's just something wrong out there, and we are the ones that need to fix it. So thank all of you for your dedication and your commitment, and for being on with Tammy and I today.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for taking the time. And if we have, hopefully we have other states that are listening. I have reached out to all of you. I would love to get you on a podcast so that we could also showcase your state assembly. So please reach out to me, and I look forward to getting you all on the schedule. All right, that's it for today, guys. Thank you. God bless, and have a good evening.